Did you know that the Phoenicians were among the first to develop an alphabet that influenced many languages today? Pretty cool, right? Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of the Phoenicians, an ancient civilization that truly left its mark on history. Known for their exceptional seafaring skills and expansive trade networks, the Phoenicians were a unique and influential society that helped shape the Mediterranean world. Our tale begins in a land known to the ancients as Canaan, a narrow strip of fertile coast nestled between the vast expanse of the Mediterranean Sea and the rugged peaks of the Lebanon Mountains. This is where the Phoenician civilization would take root and flourish. The geography of this region was instrumental in shaping the destiny of the Phoenicians. To the east, the Lebanon Mountains formed a natural barrier, funneling population growth and expansion towards the coast. To the west, the Mediterranean Sea stretched out like an endless blue highway, beckoning with promises of trade, wealth, and adventure. This coastal plain, rarely more than 25 miles wide, was blessed with a Mediterranean climate. Hot, dry summers gave way to mild, wet winters, creating ideal conditions for agriculture and human settlement. The Phoenicians made the most of their limited arable land. They terraced the hillsides to maximize cultivation area and implemented sophisticated irrigation systems. Their main crops included olives, grapes, and wheat, but it was the mighty cedar trees of Lebanon that would become one of their most prized resources. These cedars, towering giants that could reach heights of over 130 feet, were coveted throughout the ancient world for their aromatic wood, ideal for shipbuilding and construction. But long before the Phoenicians would sail their cedar ships across the Mediterranean, this land was home to diverse groups of people whose cultures and innovations would lay the groundwork for Phoenician civilization. Human habitation in this region dates back to the Paleolithic period, over 1.5 million years ago. But it's in the Neolithic period, around 10,000 BC, that we see the first settled agricultural communities emerging along the Levantine coast. These early farmers cultivated wheat, barley, and legumes. They raised sheep, goats, and cattle. But perhaps most importantly, they began to form permanent settlements, the precursors to the great Phoenician cities that would rise millennia later. One of the most significant Neolithic sites in the region is Byblos. Excavations have revealed a settlement dating back to around 8800 BC, making it one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. As the Neolithic gave way to the Bronze Age, around 3300 BC, the communities along the Levantine coast began to grow in size and complexity. Trade networks expanded, and new technologies emerged, including metalworking and more advanced pottery production. The advent of bronze technology was a game changer. Bronze tools and weapons were harder and more durable than their stone counterparts. This led to advances in agriculture, craftsmanship, and warfare. The control of tin and copper resources, necessary for bronze production, became a key factor in the region's geopolitics. It was during this Bronze Age that the distinct culture we now identify as Phoenician began to take shape. But the Phoenicians didn't emerge in isolation. They were part of a broader Canaanite culture that dominated the Levant in the early to mid-2nd millennium BC. The term Canaanite refers to the various Semitic-speaking peoples who inhabited the Levant during the Bronze Age. The Phoenicians were essentially the coastal Canaanites who, over time, developed a distinct identity based on their maritime orientation. This Canaanite period saw the rise of city-states, the development of alphabetic writing, and the establishment of trade networks that would form the foundation of later Phoenician success. As the Bronze Age progressed, the cities of the Levantine coast found themselves at the crossroads of the ancient world's great powers. To the south lay Egypt, to the north and east, the Hittites and various Mesopotamian empires. This strategic position brought both opportunity and danger. The period from about 1550 to 1200 BC saw intense competition between Egypt and the Hittite Empire for control of the Levant. The coastal cities often found themselves caught in the middle, sometimes paying tribute to one power, sometimes to another. This era of great power competition had a profound impact on the developing Phoenician culture. The cities of the coast became adept at diplomacy and trade, skills that would serve them well in the centuries to come. We have evidence of diplomatic correspondence between the rulers of coastal cities like Byblos and the Egyptian pharaohs. These letters, part of the Amarna archive, give us insight into the complex relationships and delicate balancing act these cities had to maintain. But this Bronze Age world was about to undergo a dramatic transformation. Around 1200 BC, a series of events often referred to as the Late Bronze Age collapse would reshape the political landscape of the entire Eastern Mediterranean. We see evidence of widespread destruction and abandonment of sites across the region at this time. Major powers like the Hittites collapsed entirely, while Egypt withdrew from its Levantine territories. The exact causes are still debated, but likely included climate change, invasions by the mysterious sea peoples, and systemic failures in the interconnected Bronze Age economy. In the aftermath of this collapse, as the Bronze Age gave way to the Iron Age, the stage was set for the rise of the Phoenicians as we know them. The power vacuum left by the retreating empires allowed the coastal cities to assert their independence and expand their influence. And so, from the ashes of the Late Bronze Age, the great Phoenician city-states began to emerge. Byblos, Sidon, Tyre, names that would become legendary in the ancient world. Each with its own unique history, each destined to play a crucial role in the Phoenician story. As we turn our gaze to the dawn of the Iron Age, around 1200 BC, we see the emergence of the great Phoenician city-states that would define this civilization for centuries to come. Chief among these were Byblos, Sidon, and Tyre. It's important to note that the Phoenicians didn't refer to themselves by that name. Phoenician is a Greek term, possibly referring to the purple dye they were famous for. They saw themselves as people of their individual cities, Biblians, Sidonians, Tyrians. Let's begin our journey through these legendary cities with Byblos, perhaps the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. Known to its inhabitants as Jebel, Byblos had already been a thriving center of trade for over 1,000 years by the time the Phoenician period began. The earliest temple at Byblos dates back to around 2700 BC. By 2000 BC, the city had a complex urban layout with paved roads, drainage systems, and monumental architecture. It was particularly famous for its temple of Balat Jebel, the Lady of Byblos, often associated with the Egyptian goddess Isis. Byblos had long-standing connections with Egypt, serving as a major port for the export of cedarwood to the land of the pharaohs. There's historical evidence of diplomatic gifts sent from the Egyptian pharaohs to the kings of Byblos, including a gold-inscribed dagger sent by the 6th dynasty pharaoh Pepi I, around 2250 BC. This relationship continued into the Phoenician period, with Byblos often acting as Egypt's gateway to the Levant. Byblos was also a center of learning and innovation. It's believed that the Phoenician alphabet, one of the civilization's most enduring legacies, may have been developed here. The name Byblos itself is connected to the Greek word for book, biblos, from which we get words like Bible and bibliography. This is because the Greeks associated the city with the papyrus trade, papyrus being the primary writing material of the ancient world. Moving south along the coast, we come to Sidon, known as the firstborn of Canaan. Sidon rose to prominence around 2000 BC and became one of the most important Phoenician cities. It was renowned for its purple dye industry and its skilled craftsmen, particularly in glassmaking and textile production. Excavations in Sidon have revealed a rich material culture. We've found evidence of international trade, including Egyptian scarabs, Mycenaean pottery, and Mesopotamian cylinder seals, indicating Sidon's role as a cosmopolitan trading hub. Sidon's power and influence waxed and waned over the centuries. It was sometimes overshadowed by its neighbors, but always remained a key player in Phoenician history. One of Sidon's most notable moments came in the 9th century BC, when its king, Ethbal, became the father-in-law of the infamous Israelite king Ahab. This alliance is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible and demonstrates the complex political relationships in the region. Finally, we come to Tyre, perhaps the most famous of all Phoenician cities. Founded, according to legend, in 2750 BC, Tyre would eventually become the most powerful of the Phoenician states. Tyre's geography was unique and crucial to its success. The city was built both on the mainland and on an island about half a mile offshore. This natural fortification made Tyre nearly impregnable and allowed it to survive numerous sieges throughout its history. Tyre's rise to preeminence among the Phoenician cities came in the 10th century BC under the reign of King Hiram I. Hiram I, who ruled from about 980 to 947 BC, was a contemporary of the Israelite kings David and Solomon. Under his leadership, Tyre embarked on ambitious building projects, expanding the island city and constructing grand temples to Melkart and Astarte, the chief deities of the Tyrian pantheon. Hiram also fostered international relations, famously supplying cedar wood and skilled craftsmen for the construction of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. This alliance with Israel was just one example of Tyre's diplomatic acumen. The city maintained careful relationships with the major powers of the day, balancing between Assyria, Babylon, and Egypt to maintain its independence and commercial interests. Tyre's wealth and power grew enormously during this period, fueled by its mastery of maritime trade and its colonial expansions across the Mediterranean. The material wealth of Tyre is reflected in the lavish grave goods found in the necropolis of Al-Bais. Gold jewelry, ivory carvings, and imported luxury goods testify to the city's prosperity and far-reaching trade networks. But perhaps Tyre's greatest legacy was its daughter city, Carthage, founded according to tradition in 814 BC. Carthage would go on to become a major power in its own right, carrying Phoenician culture and influence far beyond its original homeland. The founding of Carthage marks a turning point in Phoenician history. It represents the culmination of their colonization efforts and the beginning of a new chapter in which Phoenician culture would spread across the entire Western Mediterranean. As we've seen, each of these great cities, Byblos, Sidon, and Tyre, played a crucial role in shaping Phoenician civilization. But what was life like within these city-states? How were they governed? And how did they interact with each other and the wider world? The political structure of the Phoenician city-states was unique in the ancient Near East. Unlike the great empires of Mesopotamia or Egypt, the Phoenicians never united under a single ruler. Each city maintained its independence, governed by its own king or council of elders. This system had both advantages and disadvantages. On one hand, it allowed for flexibility and resilience. If one city fell to foreign invaders, the others could continue to thrive. It also fostered a spirit of competition that drove innovation and expansion. On the other hand, it meant that the Phoenicians were often vulnerable to more unified powers. The kings of the Phoenician cities were not absolute monarchs in the style of Egypt or Persia. Their power was often balanced by a council of elders and an assembly of citizens. Archaeological evidence from the city of Byblos shows an interesting power-sharing arrangement. Inscriptions mention both a king and a governor of the city, suggesting a division of responsibilities between royal and civic authorities. This relatively decentralized system of governance reflected the Phoenicians' mercantile orientation. The cities were essentially large trading enterprises, and their political structures evolved to facilitate commerce and protect economic interests. The Phoenician economy was fundamentally based on trade. They acted as middlemen, connecting the various cultures of the Mediterranean and Near East. Their cities were not just political capitals, but major ports and commercial hubs. This focus on trade and commerce permeated all aspects of Phoenician society. From the king to the common laborer, everyone was in some way connected to the vast networks of exchange that fueled the Phoenician economy. At the top were the royal family and noble houses, often involved in large-scale trade. Below them were merchants, craftsmen, and sailors. At the bottom were laborers and slaves. Despite this hierarchy, there seems to have been some degree of social mobility, particularly through success in trade or craftsmanship. The relationships between the Phoenician city-states were complex and ever-changing. While they shared a common culture and often cooperated in matters of trade and colonization, they could also be fierce rivals. We see examples of both cooperation and conflict between the cities. For instance, Tyre and Sidon sometimes formed alliances, particularly in the face of external threats. But at other times, they were bitter competitors, vying for control of trade routes and colonies. This mixture of cooperation and competition extended to the Phoenicians' relationships with other Mediterranean powers. The Phoenicians were masters of diplomacy, often playing larger powers against each other to maintain their independence and commercial interests. They paid tribute when necessary, formed alliances when beneficial, and always kept their ships sailing and their markets open. Understanding the intricate life of the Phoenician world, it is important to explore one of their most significant contributions to human civilization: their language and writing system. The Phoenician language belonged to the Northwest Semitic family, closely related to Hebrew and Aramaic. But it was their writing system that would change the world. The Phoenician alphabet, developed around 1050 BC, was a remarkable innovation. Unlike the complex writing systems of Egypt and Mesopotamia, with their hundreds of signs, the Phoenician alphabet had just 22 characters, each representing a single consonant sound. This simplicity made the alphabet easy to learn and adapt, leading to its spread across the Mediterranean and beyond. The Greeks adopted and modified the Phoenician alphabet, adding vowels. This Greek alphabet then gave rise to the Latin alphabet we use today. In a very real sense, the letters we're using right now trace their ancestry back to those Phoenician traders over 3,000 years ago. We found Phoenician inscriptions not just in their homeland, but across the Mediterranean, in Cyprus, Malta, Sardinia, and as far west as Spain. These texts give us invaluable insights into Phoenician society, religion, and commerce. Speaking of religion, the Phoenicians had a rich and complex pantheon of gods and goddesses. Each Phoenician city had its own chief deity. In Tyre, it was Melkart, often associated with the Greek Hercules. Sidon worshipped Eshmun, a god of healing. Byblos venerated Balat Jebel, the Lady of Byblos. But there were also gods worshipped across the Phoenician world, like Baal, Astarte, and Tanit. Phoenician religious practices included animal sacrifice, votive offerings, and the construction of elaborate temples. However, one aspect of their religion has been the subject of much controversy: child sacrifice. At sites like Carthage, archaeologists have found burial grounds called tophets, containing urns with the cremated remains of young children along with animal bones. Some scholars interpret this as evidence of child sacrifice, while others argue these were simply special burial sites for children who died young. This debate continues, highlighting the challenges in interpreting ancient practices through a modern lens. Phoenician art and architecture reflected both their own traditions and influences from their neighbors and trading partners. Phoenician artisans were renowned throughout the ancient world. They were particularly famous for their work with ivory, metals, and glass. Phoenician jewelry, in particular, was highly prized. In architecture, Phoenician cities showed a mix of local styles and borrowed elements. Their temples often had Egyptian influences, while their fortifications reflected the latest military engineering of the time. The Phoenicians' greatest strength was their adaptability. They took ideas from every culture they encountered, refined them, and spread them across their networks. This role as cultural intermediaries was perhaps their most significant contribution to world history. From their alphabet to their purple dye, from their master craftsmanship to their unparalleled seamanship, the Phoenicians left an indelible mark on the ancient world. Their era was not over yet because their influence was about to spread even further. As the first millennium BC dawned, the Phoenicians stood poised to dominate the Mediterranean. Their mastery of the seas would become legendary, transforming them from a collection of coastal city-states into the premier maritime power of the ancient world. At the heart of Phoenician maritime prowess lay their exceptional skill in shipbuilding. The cedar forests of Lebanon provided them with an abundant source of high-quality timber, perfect for crafting seaworthy vessels. Phoenician shipwrights developed two main types of ships: the gallos, a round-hulled merchant vessel designed for carrying large cargoes, and the sleeker, more maneuverable warships known as triremes and quinquiremes. The gallos, with its spacious hold and rounded hull, was the workhorse of Phoenician commerce. These ships could carry up to 450 tons of cargo, an impressive capacity for the time. Recent archaeological excavation found remains of Phoenician merchant ships off the coasts of Malta and Spain. These wrecks have provided invaluable information about ship construction techniques and the types of goods being transported. But it was their warships that truly set the Phoenicians apart. Fast, agile, and deadly, these vessels would dominate Mediterranean naval warfare for centuries. The trireme, with its 3 banks of oars, was a marvel of ancient engineering. It combined speed, maneuverability, and offensive capability in a way that hadn't been seen before. The Phoenicians didn't invent the trireme, but they perfected its design and use. These ships weren't just built for speed and battle, they were also designed for long-distance voyages. The Phoenicians were among the first to undertake extended sea journeys, venturing beyond the Pillars of Hercules into the Atlantic Ocean. There are even accounts, albeit controversial, of Phoenician ships circumnavigating Africa. Herodotus writes of a 3-year voyage commissioned by the Egyptian pharaoh Necho II around 600 BC. While archaeology doesn't confirm this account, it speaks to the respect accorded to Phoenician seafaring abilities in the ancient world. Whether or not this particular voyage occurred, there's ample evidence of Phoenician activity along the Atlantic coasts. Archaeologists have found Phoenician artifacts at sites along the Moroccan coast, as far south as Mogador, modern Essaouira. These finds suggest regular Phoenician voyages along the African Atlantic coast. To the north, Phoenician sailors explored the coasts of Portugal, France, and possibly even reached Britain. The tin trade was a major driver of Phoenician Atlantic exploration. Cornwall in southwest Britain was one of the ancient world's primary sources of tin, crucial for bronze production. While there's no direct evidence of Phoenician presence in Britain, it's likely they were involved in this trade, possibly through intermediaries. These Atlantic ventures represented the furthest extent of Phoenician exploration, pushing the boundaries of ancient geographical knowledge. Phoenician sailors brought back tales of distant lands, strange peoples, and unfamiliar natural phenomena. These accounts, while often embellished or misunderstood, significantly expanded the ancient Mediterranean world's understanding of global geography. The Phoenicians' maritime expertise formed the backbone of a vast and complex trading network that spanned the known world. What set the Phoenicians apart was not just the extent of their trade, but its sophistication. They weren't simply exchanging goods, they were creating interconnected markets, facilitating cultural exchange, and laying the groundwork for what we might call the first global economy. From their home cities on the Levantine coast, Phoenician ships crisscrossed the Mediterranean. They established trading posts and colonies from Cyprus in the east to Cadiz in the west, creating a commercial network unrivaled in the ancient world. But what exactly were the Phoenicians trading? Their cargo holds carried a diverse array of goods from across the ancient world. Phoenician ships carried a wide variety of commodities. From their homeland, they exported cedar wood, fine textiles dyed with Tyrian purple, glassware, and metalwork. They imported grain from Egypt, silver from Spain, copper from Cyprus, and tin from as far away as Britain. The tin trade was particularly crucial. Tin was essential for making bronze, and the Phoenicians' control of this trade gave them significant leverage in the Bronze Age economy. But perhaps the most valuable commodity the Phoenicians traded wasn't a physical good at all, but knowledge. As they traveled, the Phoenicians collected and disseminated ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. They were instrumental in spreading the alphabet, advancing metallurgical techniques, and transmitting artistic styles across the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians didn't just establish temporary trading posts. In many places, they founded permanent settlements that grew into significant cities in their own right. Cities like Carthage in North Africa, Motia in Sicily, and Gadir in Spain began as Phoenician colonies. These settlements served as hubs in the Phoenician trade network and became melting pots of Mediterranean cultures. The scale of Phoenician trade was truly staggering for its time. Their ships could carry hundreds of tons of cargo, and they made multiple voyages each year. We can estimate that at its peak, the volume of Phoenician maritime trade might have been comparable to the entire GDP of some smaller kingdoms of the time. They were operating on a scale that wouldn't be seen again until the rise of the Roman Empire. This vast trade network brought immense wealth to the Phoenician cities. Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos became known throughout the ancient world for their opulence and luxury. The prophet Ezekiel, writing in the 6th century BC, described Tyre as a place where the streets were paved with gold and silver. While this was surely an exaggeration, it speaks to the reputation for wealth that the Phoenician cities had acquired. But with great wealth came great risk. The Phoenicians had to navigate not just the physical dangers of the sea, but also the political turbulence of the ancient Near East. The Phoenician cities had to maintain a delicate balance. They needed to remain independent enough to control their trade networks, but also had to appease the great powers of the day, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, and later, Persia. This required exceptional diplomatic skill. One key to Phoenician success was their ability to make themselves indispensable to these larger powers. When the Assyrian Empire was at its height, Phoenician cities like Tyre and Sidon paid tribute, but they also provided crucial naval support for Assyrian campaigns. This made them too valuable to simply conquer and absorb. The Phoenicians' trade networks also played a crucial role in their colonization efforts, which would have far-reaching consequences for the entire Mediterranean world. No discussion of Phoenician trade would be complete without mentioning the product that gave them their name, Tyrian purple dye. The word Phoenician comes from the Greek phoenix, meaning purple. This is a direct reference to the famous dye produced in cities like Tyre and Sidon. Tyrian purple was one of the most valuable commodities in the ancient world, worth its weight in silver. But what made this dye so special? Tyrian purple was produced from the mucus secretion of several species of predatory sea snails, primarily the Murex brandaris. The process of extracting and preparing the dye was labor-intensive and time-consuming. First, the snails were collected in large numbers. Then, the hypobranchial gland was extracted from each snail. This gland secretion, when exposed to air and sunlight, undergoes a chemical reaction that produces the purple pigment. The scale of this industry was enormous. It's estimated that it took thousands of snails to produce just 1 gram of dye. Archaeologists have found massive mounds of crushed murex shells near ancient Phoenician cities. These purple hills are a testament to the industrial scale of dye production. The result of this labor-intensive process was a dye of unparalleled quality and prestige. Tyrian purple didn't fade with washing or sunlight exposure. If anything, it became brighter and more intense over time. This, combined with its rarity, made it a powerful status symbol. In many ancient societies, the wearing of purple was restricted to royalty and high-ranking officials. In Rome, for instance, the border of a senator's toga was dyed with Tyrian purple, while the emperor alone could wear a solid purple toga. The purple dye industry was a cornerstone of the Phoenician economy, providing immense wealth and prestige to cities like Tyre. The purple dye trade was arguably the first luxury goods industry in history. It created a market for a product valued not just for its utility, but for its symbolism and exclusivity. But the environmental cost of this industry was significant. The intensive harvesting of murex snails led to localized extinctions in some areas. This is one of the earliest examples we have of an industry impacting marine ecosystems on a large scale. Despite these drawbacks, the purple dye industry remained central to Phoenician identity and economy for centuries. Even as Phoenician political power waned, their expertise in purple dye production ensured their continued relevance in the Mediterranean world. The industry continued well into the Byzantine period, only declining with the fall of Constantinople in 1453 CE. As we've seen, the Phoenicians' mastery of the seas encompassed far more than just skilled navigation. Their shipbuilding expertise, vast trade networks, and unique industries like purple dye production combined to make them the premier maritime civilization of the ancient Mediterranean. The Phoenicians didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas, technologies, and cultures. Their ships carried not just cargo, but the seeds of a more interconnected world. As the first millennium BC progressed, the Phoenicians' maritime prowess led them to venture further and further from their homeland. What began as a network of trading posts would evolve into one of the ancient world's most extensive colonial empires. The story of Phoenician colonization is inextricably linked with the Western Mediterranean, where their influence would reshape the region's political and cultural landscape. Phoenician expansion westward was driven by a combination of factors: the search for new resources, the need for strategic ports to support their long-distance trade, and possibly population pressure in their homeland. The process of colonization was gradual and varied. Some settlements began as simple trading posts or way stations, while others were planned cities from the start. We can trace the Phoenician colonial expansion through a combination of archaeological evidence and later historical accounts. The earliest colonies appear to date from the 9th century BC, with activity intensifying in the 8th and 7th centuries. Among the earliest and most significant of these colonies was Carthage, founded on the North African coast in what is now Tunisia. According to tradition, Carthage was founded in 814 BC by Queen Dido, also known as Alyssa, a princess from Tyre. While we can't confirm this exact date, archaeological evidence does support a late 9th century founding. The story of Carthage's founding is steeped in legend and drama. The tale goes that Dido fled Tyre after her brother, the king, murdered her husband. She led a group of followers to North Africa, where she negotiated with the local Berber king for land. Cleverly, she asked for only as much land as could be encompassed by an ox hide. She then cut the hide into thin strips, creating a perimeter large enough to encompass a hill, which became the citadel of Carthage. Whether myth or history, this tale reflects the cunning and resourcefulness attributed to the Phoenicians by their contemporaries. Early Carthage was a relatively modest settlement, but it was strategically located. It had excellent harbors, fertile hinterland, and was positioned at a narrow point in the Mediterranean, allowing it to control maritime traffic. Carthage would grow to become the most powerful of the Phoenician colonies, eventually rivaling and even surpassing the mother cities of the Levant. By the 6th century BC, Carthage had become the de facto leader of the Western Phoenician colonies. As the Eastern Phoenician cities fell under Persian control, Carthage emerged as the guardian of Phoenician civilization in the West. But Carthage was far from the only Phoenician colony in the Western Mediterranean. The islands of Sicily and Sardinia saw significant Phoenician settlement. In Sicily, there has been archaeological evidence of Phoenician presence at sites like Motia, Panormus, modern Palermo, and Saguntum. These settlements played a crucial role in Phoenician trade networks, acting as stepping stones between the eastern and western Mediterranean. Sardinia, with its rich mineral resources, was particularly attractive to the Phoenicians. They established several colonies on the island, including Nora, Sulcis, and Theros. These sites have yielded a wealth of Phoenician artifacts, giving us insight into colonial life. The Phoenicians also established a strong presence on the Iberian Peninsula, drawn by its rich silver mines. The silver mines of southern Spain were among the richest in the ancient world. Phoenician technological expertise allowed for more efficient extraction, fueling an economic boom in the region. The city of Gadir, modern-day Cadiz, was one of the most important Phoenician colonies in Spain. Founded around 1100 BC, it's considered the oldest continuously inhabited city in Western Europe. Phoenician influence in Spain wasn't limited to the coast. Their trade networks reached deep into the interior, influencing local cultures and economies. We can see Phoenician influence in the art and technology of indigenous Iberian cultures. The introduction of the potter's wheel, new metallurgical techniques, and alphabetic writing can all be traced to Phoenician contact. As Phoenician colonies grew and prospered, they began to develop distinct identities, blending Phoenician culture with local influences. While these colonies maintained strong ties with their mother cities, they also developed unique characteristics. Carthage, for instance, while preserving many Phoenician traditions, also incorporated elements of Berber culture and developed its own dialect of the Phoenician language. As the Phoenicians established colonies and trading posts across the Mediterranean and beyond, they became agents of unprecedented cultural exchange. The Phoenicians acted as a conduit for ideas, technologies, and cultural practices to flow between East and West, North and South. Their colonies became melting pots where diverse cultures interacted and influenced each other. Perhaps the most significant cultural export of the Phoenicians was their alphabet. The Phoenician alphabet, with its simple system of 22 consonantal letters, was easily adaptable to other languages. As Phoenician traders and colonists spread across the Mediterranean, so did their writing system. The Greeks adopted and adapted the Phoenician alphabet, adding vowels to create their own writing system. This Greek alphabet then gave rise to the Latin alphabet we use today. In a very real sense, the letters we're using right now owe their existence to those ancient Phoenician traders. But the alphabet was far from the only Phoenician contribution to Mediterranean cultures. Phoenician artistic styles, particularly in jewelry, metalwork, and ivory carving, were highly influential. We can see Phoenician motifs and techniques adopted and adapted by Greeks, Etruscans, and other peoples across the region. Phoenician religious ideas also spread with their colonies, often blending with local beliefs. The cult of Melkart, the principal deity of Tyre, spread to Phoenician colonies and beyond. In Greece, Melkart was often identified with Heracles, contributing to the complex mythology surrounding this hero god. In the realm of technology, Phoenician expertise in fields like metallurgy, glassmaking, and textile production was eagerly adopted by other cultures. The purple dye industry, so central to Phoenician identity, spread to their colonies. In archaeological excavation, archaeologists found evidence of purple dye production at sites across the Mediterranean, from Mogador on the Atlantic coast to Tyre itself. But cultural exchange was not a one-way street. As Phoenicians settled in new lands, they also absorbed elements of local cultures. In North Africa, Phoenician settlers adopted elements of Berber culture. In Sicily and Sardinia, we see blends of Phoenician and local artistic styles. The Phoenician colonial world was one of remarkable diversity and dynamism. By the 6th century BC, you could travel from Tyre to Gades, a journey of over 2,000 miles, and everywhere in between find people speaking dialects of the same language, using the same script, worshipping similar gods, and participating in a shared commercial and cultural network. It was globalization, ancient Mediterranean style. It is obvious the Phoenician colonization and expansion had profound and lasting impacts on the ancient world. Their colonies not only extended Phoenician political and economic influence, but also served as catalysts for cultural exchange on an unprecedented scale. The legacy of this period would long outlast the Phoenicians themselves. The colonial networks they established, particularly in the Western Mediterranean, would form the basis for Carthage's later empire and would significantly shape the world Rome would eventually conquer. Turning our attention to the rise of Carthage, we see a city that would become the greatest of the Phoenician colonies, leaving an indelible mark on history. Carthage, founded in the 9th century BC by settlers from Tyre, began as a modest trading post on the North African coast. Over the centuries, it grew into a powerful city-state, renowned for its wealth, naval prowess, and strategic acumen. Carthage's location was key to its success. Situated on a peninsula with excellent natural harbors, it was ideally positioned to control maritime trade routes in the Western Mediterranean. By the 6th century BC, Carthage had established itself as the leader of the Phoenician colonies in the west, taking on a role similar to that of its mother city, Tyre, in the east. The archaeological record shows a city of considerable sophistication and wealth. Carthage boasted grand public buildings, temples, and a complex urban layout, reflecting its status as a major power. Carthage's rise was fueled by its control of key trade routes and its ability to exploit the rich resources of North Africa. The Carthaginians were master traders, dealing in goods such as precious metals, textiles, and agricultural products. They also developed the lucrative trade in African elephants, which would later become a symbol of their military might. Carthage's political system was unique, blending elements of monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy. The city was governed by a pair of elected magistrates known as seafates, along with a council of elders and a popular assembly. This system allowed for a balance of power and was admired by contemporaries, including the Greek philosopher Aristotle. As Carthage's power grew, it inevitably came into conflict with another rising power, Rome. This rivalry would culminate in a series of epic conflicts known as the Punic Wars. The First Punic War, fought from 264 to 241 BC, was primarily a naval conflict over control of Sicily. It marked the beginning of a century-long struggle for dominance in the Western Mediterranean. Despite initial successes, Carthage was ultimately defeated, ceding Sicily to Rome and paying a heavy indemnity. The loss of Sicily was a significant blow to Carthage, but it quickly rebounded, expanding its influence in Spain to compensate for the lost territory. The Second Punic War, from 218 to 201 BC, is perhaps the most famous of the three conflicts, largely due to the exploits of the Carthaginian general Hannibal. Hannibal's daring crossing of the Alps with his army, including war elephants, is one of the most celebrated feats in military history. His subsequent victories in Italy, including the Battle of Cannae, where he inflicted a devastating defeat on the Romans, showcased his tactical genius. Despite his successes, Hannibal was unable to secure a decisive victory, and the war ultimately turned in Rome's favor. The Romans, under the leadership of Scipio Africanus, took the fight to Carthage itself, culminating in the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. Hannibal was defeated, and Carthage was forced to accept harsh peace terms. The Third Punic War, from 149 to 146 BC, was a brief but brutal conflict that ended with the complete destruction of Carthage. The Romans, determined to eliminate Carthage as a rival once and for all, besieged the city for 3 years. When it finally fell, they razed it to the ground, selling the surviving inhabitants into slavery. The fall of Carthage marked the end of Phoenician power in the Mediterranean, but its legacy would endure. The destruction of Carthage was a pivotal moment in ancient history, reshaping the balance of power in the Mediterranean. With Carthage out of the picture, Rome emerged as the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean, paving the way for its eventual transformation into a vast empire. But the legacy of Carthage and the Phoenicians lived on in various ways. Carthage's contributions to maritime technology, trade, and urban planning influenced Roman practices. The city itself was eventually rebuilt by the Romans and became an important center in the province of Africa. Carthaginian culture, particularly its religious practices and artistic styles, left a lasting imprint on the regions it once controlled. In North Africa, the legacy of Carthage can be seen in the continuation of certain religious practices, such as the worship of Baal and Tanit, well into the Roman period. The story of Carthage also became a powerful symbol in literature and history, inspiring works from Virgil's Aeneid to modern retellings of Hannibal's campaigns. Carthage's dramatic rise and fall, its epic struggle against Rome, and the figure of Hannibal have captivated the imagination for centuries, serving as a potent reminder of the complexities of power, ambition, and legacy. As we reflect on the legacy of Carthage, we see a civilization that, like its Phoenician forebears, excelled in trade, exploration, and cultural exchange, leaving a lasting impact on the ancient world. The story of Carthage is a testament to the enduring influence of Phoenician civilization, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Now, as we turn to the final chapter of our exploration, we must consider the broader legacy of the Phoenicians and their lasting impact on our world today. The Phoenicians, renowned as master traders and navigators, left a legacy that has endured through the ages. Their contributions to language, culture, and technology continue to resonate in our modern world. Among the most significant legacies of the Phoenicians is their development of the alphabet, a revolutionary system of writing that transformed communication. The Phoenician alphabet, with its 22 consonantal letters, was a major departure from the complex cuneiform and hieroglyphic systems of the time. Its simplicity and adaptability made it accessible to a wide range of cultures. As Phoenician traders and settlers spread across the Mediterranean, so did their writing system. The Greeks adopted and adapted it, adding vowels, which in turn influenced the Latin alphabet and many others. The impact of the Phoenician alphabet cannot be overstated. It laid the foundation for the written communication systems that underpin modern Western languages. Beyond their contributions to writing, the Phoenicians were instrumental in advancing various technologies and cultural practices. Phoenician glassmaking was highly advanced, and their methods influenced later Roman glass production. Their techniques in metallurgy, particularly in working with bronze and silver, were also widely adopted. Culturally, the Phoenicians were great synthesizers, blending elements from different civilizations to create a unique and cosmopolitan identity. Phoenician art and architecture incorporated influences from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece, resulting in a distinctive style that was both diverse and innovative. For centuries, much of what we knew about the Phoenicians came from the writings of their rivals, particularly the Greeks and Romans. However, modern archaeology has begun to uncover the true extent of Phoenician achievements. Excavations in Lebanon, Syria, and across the Mediterranean have revealed a wealth of information about Phoenician cities, trade networks, and daily life. The discovery of inscriptions, pottery, and other artifacts has provided new insights into Phoenician society and culture. Phoenician inscriptions, often found on stone steels and pottery, have been crucial in understanding their language, religious practices, and political structures. Underwater archaeology has also played a key role in rediscovering Phoenician history. Shipwrecks off the coasts of Spain, Italy, and Israel have yielded well-preserved artifacts, offering a glimpse into the maritime prowess of the Phoenicians. These discoveries have helped to paint a more nuanced picture of the Phoenicians, moving beyond the stereotypes perpetuated by their ancient adversaries. The Phoenicians were often portrayed as cunning and mercantile, but archaeology reveals a complex and sophisticated civilization that was deeply interconnected with its neighbors. Today, the legacy of the Phoenicians is most keenly felt in Lebanon, their ancient homeland, where their heritage is a source of national pride. In Lebanon, the Phoenicians are celebrated as ancestors and cultural icons. Their influence is evident in everything from place names to popular folklore. Efforts to preserve and promote Phoenician heritage have gained momentum in recent years. Sites like Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon have been designated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, recognizing their historical and cultural significance. Educational programs and cultural festivals celebrate Phoenician history, fostering a sense of connection to the past. The Phoenicians are seen as pioneers of globalization, their story resonating in a world increasingly defined by interconnectedness and cultural exchange. As we conclude our journey through the history of the Phoenicians, we reflect on their enduring legacy. The Phoenicians were more than just traders and sailors. They were innovators, bridge builders, and cultural ambassadors. Their legacy is woven into the fabric of our modern world. From the alphabet we use to the art and architecture that surrounds us, the influence of the Phoenicians is all around. Their story is a testament to the power of cultural exchange and the enduring impact of human ingenuity. The Phoenicians' greatest strength was their adaptability. They took ideas from every culture they encountered, refined them, and spread them across their networks. This role as cultural intermediaries was perhaps their most significant contribution to world history. They didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas, technologies, and cultures. Their ships carried not just cargo, but the seeds of a more interconnected world. As we look to the future, the lessons of the Phoenicians remind us of the value of openness, adaptability, and the pursuit of knowledge. In our increasingly globalized world, we can see echoes of the Phoenician legacy in our interconnected economies, our multicultural societies, and our ever-expanding networks of communication and exchange. The story of the Phoenicians is, in many ways, the story of civilization itself, a tale of innovation, exploration, and the power of human connection. As we face the challenges of our own time, we would do well to remember the example set by these ancient mariners and merchants who dared to sail beyond the horizon and, in doing so, change the course of history. Their legacy lives on in the words we write, the seas we sail, and the connections we forge across cultures and continents. Let us remember that the story of the Phoenicians is not just a tale of the past, but a beacon for the future, a reminder of what we can achieve when we embrace diversity, foster innovation, and reach out across the seas to connect with our fellow human beings. So, what do you find most fascinating about the Phoenicians? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to check out my other videos on ancient civilizations for more exciting stories from the past. Thanks for watching.